In this video, we'll take a closer look at how the two most powerful countries in the world are preparing for war. We'll explore the new arms race between the US and China, and we'll discuss the devastating consequences of a potential total war. Both the US and China are making preparations for a potential war over Taiwan. Even though neither side genuinely desires such a conflict, the major challenge for the US is the considerable distance that separates them from Taiwan. This geographic obstacle presents a significant hurdle as it allows China to focus its military efforts on taking Taiwan, while having its bases and logistics nearby. The US has established a strategic approach known as the first and second island chains to counterbalance this geographical disadvantage. However, the complex situation continues to evolve, with both nations closely watching each other's moves in this delicate and critical region. Total war is the use of all available military and civilian resources to achieve victory in armed conflict. It is characterized by the targeting of civilians and the destruction of infrastructure. Total war is often fought between two major powers, and it can have devastating consequences for the entire world. In the context of the US and China, total war could be fought over a number of issues, including trade, technology, and military affairs. If total war broke out between the US and China, it would likely be a very destructive conflict, with both sides using their full military and civilian resources to achieve victory. Here is a clearer explanation of total war. Based on the topic of the US and China, total war is a type of warfare in which the United States and China would use all of their available resources, including military, economic, and civilian resources, to defeat each other. This would involve the targeting of civilians and the destruction of infrastructure in both countries. Total war would be a very destructive conflict, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. Total war could be triggered by a number of factors, including a trade dispute, a territorial dispute, or a cyber attack. The US has been the world's heavyweight champion for decades, but China is rising fast. China's economy is growing rapidly, and its military is becoming increasingly powerful. The US is worried that China is challenging its global dominance, and China is worried that the US is trying to stop its rise. Both countries are spending heavily on their militaries. They are developing new weapons and technologies, and they are expanding their forces. They are also preparing for cyber warfare and economic warfare. There are a number of reasons are the US and China preparing for total war. One reason is the increasing competition between the two countries for global dominance. The US wants to remain the world's leading superpower, but China is challenging that position. This competition is leading to tensions in a number of areas, including trade, technology, and military affairs. Another reason for the US and China's preparations for total war is the rise of nationalism in both countries. In recent years, there has been a growing sense of nationalism in both the US and China. This nationalism is fueled by a number of factors, including economic insecurity, immigration, and cultural differences. Nationalism can make it more difficult for countries to resolve their differences peacefully, and it can increase the risk of war. The US and China's preparations for total war are also being driven by technological advances. In recent years, there have been significant advances in military technology, including the development of new weapons and surveillance systems. These advances are making it easier for countries to fight total war, and they are also increasing the lethality of war. The situation is dangerous. The US and China are both preparing for total war, and the risk of conflict is increasing. It is important for the two countries to find a way to resolve their differences peacefully. The US military strategy to defend Taiwan is known as the dual pincer approach. This involves stationing US troops and military equipment in South Korea, Japan, and the Philippines in order to block the People's Liberation Army (PLA) from approaching Taiwan from both the north and the south. The US has a long history of military cooperation with its allies in the region, and the dual pincer approach is a continuation of this policy. The US has over 28,500 troops stationed in South Korea, 55,000 troops stationed in Japan, and over 5,000 troops stationed in the Philippines. The US also has a number of military bases in these countries, which would be used to launch operations in the event of a conflict with China. The dual pincer approach is designed to deter China from attacking Taiwan. If China were to attack Taiwan, the US would be able to quickly deploy its forces to the region and block the PLA from approaching Taiwan. The US would also be able to use its air and naval forces to attack the PLA and support the Taiwanese military. The dual pincer approach is a complex and challenging military strategy. However, it is an effective way to deter China from attacking Taiwan and to ensure the security of this important US ally. The US has a military plan to defend Taiwan in case China attacks. The plan is called the dual pincer approach. It involves having US troops and weapons in South Korea, Japan, and the Philippines. This would allow the U.S. to block the Chinese army from getting to Taiwan from the north and the south. The U.S. has been working with its allies in the region for many years. The dual pincer approach is a continuation of this work. The U.S. has thousands of troops and many military bases in South Korea, Japan, and the Philippines. These bases would be used to launch operations if China attacks Taiwan. The dual pincer approach is designed to stop China from attacking Taiwan in the first place. If China does attack, the U.S. will be able to quickly send troops and weapons to the region to block the Chinese army. The U.S. will also be able to use its air and naval forces to attack the Chinese army and help the Taiwanese military. The dual pincer approach is a complex and difficult military plan. However, it is an effective way to deter China from attacking Taiwan and to keep this important U.S. ally safe. Air superiority is one of the most important factors in any potential conflict between the U.S. and China over Taiwan. The U.S. military has a number of advantages in air superiority, including more advanced aircraft, better trained pilots, and a larger network of air bases in the region. However, China has been rapidly modernizing its air force in recent years, and it now has a number of advanced aircraft that can challenge the U.S. Additionally, China has a large number of surface-to-air missiles, SAMs, that could make it difficult for the U.S. to achieve air superiority. Despite these challenges, the U.S. military is confident that it can achieve air superiority over China in a potential conflict over Taiwan. The U.S. has a number of plans in place to achieve air superiority. Deploying U.S. aircraft from South Korea, Japan, and the Philippines. This would allow the U.S. to quickly deploy a large number of aircraft to the region in the event of a conflict using stealth aircraft. The U.S. has a number of stealth aircraft, such as the F-22 Raptor and the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. These aircraft are difficult for Chinese radar to detect, and they would be able to strike Chinese targets with impunity using electronic warfare. EW aircraft. EW aircraft can disrupt and degrade Chinese radar and communication system. This would make it more difficult for China to track and engage U.S. aircraft using air-to-air refueling. Air-to-air refueling allows U.S. aircraft to stay in the air for longer periods of time. This would give the U.S. a significant advantage in a prolonged conflict. The U.S. military is also developing new technologies to help it achieve air superiority, such as hypersonic weapons and directed energy weapons. Hypersonic weapons are very fast and maneuverable, and they would be difficult for Chinese air defenses to intercept. Directed energy weapons can destroy enemy targets with lasers or microwaves, and they would be very effective against Chinese aircraft and SAMs. Achieving air superiority is essential for the U.S. to win a potential conflict with China over Taiwan. By controlling the skies, the U.S. would be able to prevent China from resupplying its forces on Taiwan and from attacking U.S. ships and aircraft. The U.S. would also be able to strike Chinese targets with impunity.